Hello, nerds for Yang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Now with this campaign, bang, dang, is and true. Come roll with the Yang Gang.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds!
In unison. Good job, Sam.
Yeah, man, you guys clearly a well synchronized team. Welcome to the show, Sam and Ian.
Thank you.
Hey,
Good
Tom.
to be here.
Well, this is going to be a first for the Nerds for Humanity channel because, as some of you know who are watching this, I have been volunteering for a side project called Of the People. And Sam and Ian are fellow volunteers. We have a few others as well who couldn't join us, including Eric Sanchez, who's a supporter of the project. And what we thought we'd do for this live stream is share a little bit about the project, why we decided to get involved, but then perhaps most interesting, I don't know, maybe not to some people, but we'll do like a quick stand-up, like a kind of status update on where we are, and then we'll also talk about sort of potential future directions. So maybe I'll start with what the project's about and why I decided to get involved, and then Sam and Ian, if you could share your point of view, because I think we all came for our own kind of motivations. For me, what was interesting was I was interviewing a lot of candidates for Congress on this show, and I noticed that, wow, to decide to run for Congress or any elected office, it's such a momentous decision. But maybe it doesn't need to be such a high bar to even decide to kind of test the waters. And as you guys know, being in the tech kind of startup world, you want to make it easy for lots of projects to kind of get started. And then sometimes the things that you didn't think were going to be a huge success turn out to be a huge success, but they would never have gotten started if there weren't this infrastructure for basically entrepreneurs to dip their toe in the water. So in the startup world, we have angel investors, we have these incubators, but for public service, there really isn't one, right? Like you see people running who basically spent their whole lives preparing for it. And then there's the rest of us who, go to our 9-to-5 jobs and take care of our families. And, you notice like, well, why aren't just everyday Americans who are very impactful and successful in their own careers or their lives, why aren't they kind of, putting their hat in the ring more often? And so borrowing from kind of the tech world of like Kickstarter or change.org, those kinds of things, a lot of us started talking about this Of the People idea where, well, what if someone could just create a profile like in a night? And they could say, this is who I am, this is what I believe. And then this platform would have an established base of, leaned in voters and people who care about policy and politics to give feedback to that person and also express potential interest or maybe pledge support if the person were to for real run. And so at any rate, this was what got me interested, because I was like, man, I'm tired of these career politicians. Like, I'm tired of seeing capable people in my private life, at work or in the neighborhood doing great things for their companies or for their local organizations. But then like when you ask them, well, why aren't you running for office? They're like, oh, well, that's like a whole nother world. That's not me kind of thing. And I wouldn't even know where to begin. So that's what got me hooked. And I know, Ian, you and I talked shortly after, this started germinating. And what was it that kind of got you initially interested? And then we'll go on to Sam.
Yeah, I mean, I think The first thing is kind of what you mentioned in the beginning, the 0 to 1 problem of, getting from I'm interested in running for office and how do you even take that first step? And that is kind of, in startups, which I know we all have a bunch of experience in, that's like the hardest thing, to go from nothing to something. So, the idea of being able to build something to help people make that step, that just made a lot of logical sense to me. And then also, I think, for me, I was gone for the past 4 years in Switzerland, and kind of watching, seeing a bunch of stuff that's happening in the United States, and just being able to help out in allowing us to get maybe some more blood in politics. And it just seemed like a good way to kind of take, I think, we've all felt different emotions and angst about what's going on. And so just being able to being able to point that in a direction that I think could help us out in just getting more candidates out there. I think that was a big motivation. And also, the other thing is working with people, so I know Tom and Sam, and I'm always open to jumping on a project there. So that's another part of it. So.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think, there's a bunch of you see this in work all the time. There's a bunch of good people out there, a bunch of qualified people who can, just given a chance, can do things. So I think if we can build things that allow people to kind of get out there and run and see what they can do. I just love that idea of kind of helping people do amazing things that they never thought they could do. So
100% agree. Sam, what about you, my friend?
Yeah, well, while you guys were off in Switzerland enjoying your nice little vacation, I was here in ground zero watching, the fallout erupt around me. But no, I guess, the importance of political leadership has never been more, clear to me, right? We're watching our country kind of struggle through a pandemic. There's rampant the country's very divided, and we can't seem to kind of agree or achieve consensus and make change. There's just so many things going on which are really troubling to me, and I don't want to see these problems continue, and I don't see our current political system or our current political representatives really achieving change. So anything I can do to kind of help jumpstart, new, fresh voices, I think is a really compelling exercise. I've been really inspired, for instance, by AOC and kind of the voice she's brought, and the kind of perspective and just how powerful that can be. So I'd like to see, more similar, new, fresh voices that begin to kind of change our political leadership and start to kind of change the system so that a lot of these problems start, getting better, right? Because right now it just feels like they're getting worse. So I'm excited about that. I also would echo what Ian said. When Tom and Ian come to me and say they're doing something, I'm generally on board, because these two guys are just super fun to work with and high octane personalities. So I know we'll get stuff done.
Right on. Well, you, Sam, there's a reason why we reached out to you so quickly when Ian and I were talking about who could we get help with on the front end. That wasn't a very long conversation, and so I'm so delighted that you agreed to volunteer. Maybe for the benefit of the audience, and I already see some questions in the chat, which we'll hit in a second. We should probably share a little bit about our own backgrounds and sort of our experience, because I do think one of the things I've noticed in political kind of advocacy and volunteer work is there's a lot of folks who have a lot of ideas, and they're great ideas, but they may not have the kind of expertise or experience to build kind of a technology solution. And I think one of the things I'm really excited about the group that we put together is that we've been really thoughtful about getting help from folks who kind of do this for a living during the daytime. And to be clear, this is a complete volunteer project being done in our own personal time. This is why we're doing this stream on the weekend as an example. And nothing that we do for this project is approved, reviewed, supported by our current employers. This is completely personal. But that said, we could share a little bit about our backgrounds, because I know some of the people who have been very kind, including Eric Sanchez, the former comms head for the Yang campaign, has been supporting us. I think part of the reason is that he's like, oh, well, this is a group that might be able to pull it together, that we kind of have the capability to execute. And I think one of the reasons for that is just the experience that we have. I'll start, and then maybe we can go in the same order, Ian and then Sam. So let's see, my background, I've been in tech pretty much since 1999. So a long time now. Always in what in the industry we call product management type roles, like trying to figure out like, okay, what's a problem we can solve for a customer, and how might we solve it, and what might the kind of solution look like, and what might the requirements be. Is that a new cat you had in Switzerland, right? Or
no, it's the cat from Switzerland ran off right before we left. So we had to replace
I was like, I ain't going over there. You want to go where?
Yeah.
So I've been in product management for a long time. Let's see, I've worked at big companies like Microsoft and Google, but I've also worked at startups, which is how Ian and Sam and I intersected, because we worked at a startup together that was quite intense and exciting, and learned a lot from that. I'm just fired up because I know these two guys, and then also our designer Marin. Like we're bringing, frankly, if this were a for-profit startup, this would be an A team. And the fact that this is a non-profit, I think this is a very unique combination of experience that we're going to bring to bear, and hopefully we can make an impact. So that's a little bit about me, but Ian, let's get your story.
Yeah, so I got into tech 1 year before Tom in 1998 as a QA tester. That was back when I was in college. So when I was in college, I was going to be a civil engineer, and decided I took a programming class and loved it. And so kind of since then, I've always been very passionate about building things. And I know that's actually that's kind of how Tom and I met. We were at kind of a founder, a speed dating thing for founders. And I'd said, hey, I like to build things. And Tom said, hey, I like to work with people who build things. So, anyway, out of college, I went to Amazon and worked there for several years. And then I was always just really interested in kind of learning how everything worked kind of from the ground up as an engineer, a software engineer. And so I really wanted to get that opportunity to kind of learn that and do that. So I left Amazon and did kind of independent consulting and startups for about a decade. And there I had an opportunity to build, kind of several kind of just websites and also businesses kind of from the ground up. And so that's really what I kind of enjoy doing. And so actually this is an opportunity to kind of do that again. My current job, I don't get those opportunities as much. It's a bigger corporation. So this is a great opportunity to kind of take those things that I'm really passionate about, just like, hey, how can we use technology to solve these problems quickly? And so it's just a great chance to kind of take everything I've learned and kind of put it out there for good use. So,
thanks,
Sam?
Ian.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I started in tech in 2007, and I've been
Whippersnapper.
Exactly. You wouldn't know it with the mustache and the bald. Yeah. So, and I've always, I'm actually a self-trained software engineer. I took a few computer science classes at UW and actually meant to pursue the discipline, but that's kind of right when the dot-com bubble erupted. And I'll never forget this conversation I had with my parents, which was, I don't know, guys, like, I don't know about this software development, like, job. There might not be a lot of jobs in that industry. I better major in something else. Looking back, you have to chuckle at that, and hey, I should have just stuck with it. But I got out of college and went straight into tech because I knew I loved it and knew I liked writing code. I've always been somebody who sits in the kind of front end specialty. I like to make great visual experiences, make them fast and snappy, and have built a number of different web applications. Worked at smaller startups and larger companies. And again, always been working in that kind of front to middle space. At Yably, I think it was awesome to just watch how much Ian and I and Tom were able to build so quickly, right? With good product leadership, a back end and a framework that's continuously evolving and changing, and a front end that's fast and snappy. Like we made stuff happen. Still, definitely goes down as like the most effective team that I've shipped with. So look forward to shipping more.
Do you remember when we built like 5 different ideas in like 2 months? That was so fun, man.
Didn't we sell Sam's car?
I think we tried to. That was one of the ideas, the car sales kind of marketplace. I still think that is way too painful of a process the way it is today. But
I was wanting. We're looking to buy a car right now. I was wanting one of those services.
Yeah,
I was thinking back to those
especially
days.
now. Yeah, in the COVID world, like you totally want to do that kind of thing.
By the way, Sam, just to let you know, I miss you every day at work. I'm like, oh, if only Sam were here, he could do this.
And I miss that office we had where we were just sitting around kind of like an island of desks and within like 2-3 meters of each other, and the big giant like whiteboard wall. Oh my God.
And a foot bath.
And the foot bath.
Nice.
And then Sam had the foot bath. Yes. Sam was an avid soccer player and, got himself injured and kept playing.
These guys got my little foot jacuzzi, so all was well.
Yeah. There's still like a little mark on the carpet, I think, from that. They probably next tenant was like, "What happened here?" So let's do this. I'm going to quickly show the audience the landing page, and then we'll go over status on where we are. So the let's see, the landing page. Oh, let me open it. Oh, it's at ofthepeople.co. And it's I think it's a pretty exciting approach to kind of change, to the extent that what we're saying here is that, hey, this country was founded with the idea that our representatives would be drawn of the people, by the people, and for the people, as Lincoln said. And that's not what we see today. What we see today is actually representatives at the congressional level that are now serving 50% more than they did in the 1950s. And they're typically there for 5 terms. And if they are running for re-election, they only lose 9% of the time, like 91% kind of re-up rate, even though 70% dissatisfaction of the people with Congress. So I think our theory of the case is that part of the problem is there's not enough competition. And, as Sam pointed out, you do have these stories of like the AOC that kind of challenges the old crusty incumbent. The one of the risks is that even an AOC 5 terms from now, who knows, like if she's going to have the same kind of fiery independence, right? Like the incentives will change for her. Hopefully, she and others will stay, kind of independent. But I think no one would argue with the idea that more competition, the better. And if the incumbents get reelected because they're fighting off challengers and they're earning those votes, then that's great. But the opposite is like you see some of these races where the incumbent is unchallenged, and you're like, well, how is that even a good thing? Or if they're challenged by, some fringe candidate. And I think what we're trying to see is we want just more everyday Americans running for office. And the way we might get there is that it's sort of this two-sided platform, in that on the candidate side, you could think, wow, I could create a profile very quickly. I don't have to deal with a bunch of FEC stuff, because the FEC actually allows for they literally call it a testing the waters period. This is before you've raised like $5,000, and you can just start to kind of see if there's a general interest. You could also, through Of the People, start getting feedback from potential voters and kind of try out like, okay, like what kinds of questions am I getting? Are people resonating with my bio or with my policy positions? And then you can decide like, oh, wow, there's something here I do want to file and do like a formal campaign. Or maybe you say, oh, maybe this is not my cycle. And, at least I found out very quickly. And you can make that decision maybe, in the long run in hours, but it could be like days or weeks in the early term when we are still building up the platform. And then on the other side of the coin, you've got these voters who care about their representatives. They want to participate. They want to have an active role in choosing, not just waiting for whatever gets printed on the ballot, on November 3rd, but they want to have a say earlier. So this is a great way for you as a voter to say, hey, who is in my district that's thinking of running? Or who is in the country thinking of running that cares deeply about policies that I care about, or, has similar interests, or maybe has similar affiliations to myself. And I want to actually be, support them. I want to offer to volunteer. I want to make a non-binding financial pledge, which would then help the candidate say like, oh, well, I know for my district, I'm going to need to raise 100K. So if I actually get like 10K of non-binding, maybe that's enough to kind of give it a shot. You could give feedback to prospective candidates saying, hey, I really think you need to talk more about this issue, or I want to know what your position is on this issue. So it's kind of a two-sided marketplace. And that's a good segue for us to talk about kind of where we are, as a project. We basically have been spending a lot of time assembling the team. And I should also thank all of the people who have supported Of the People, both by kind of spreading the word. And then there's a group of folks who've already started on Patreon supporting Of the People. So you can learn more about how to financially support us if this is a project of interest to you at ofthepeople.co. And then there's a link to it. There's a call to action that says accelerate this project. But maybe that's a good segue for us to talk about where we are at a high level. I would say we are just starting kind of software development. Unfortunately, there is a lot of lead up time to kind of get the tooling, decide on the tooling, to set up the email, the domain, and storage, and these kinds of things. But maybe I'll let you, Ian, kind of share where you see us at the moment and what's coming up. Yeah.
So the main thing that we've been trying to figure out is basically, the kind of foundations to build the kind of what we want up. And it's a little tricky this isn't like a normal startup where, you have all of your work days to get this going. So really, I think this is an interesting project because we're trying to figure out how can we build what we're going to build, but we also have a pretty limited time constraints right now. And also thinking about, as we grow and potentially bring more people on the team, we want to build something that people are going to be able to kind of, if they want to volunteer, they can jump in and help out. So, with that, mainly, it's been like kind of Sam and I talking about, okay, what what does Sam want to do on the front end? And bless Sam's heart, he has some great ideas there, and we're going to do that. So I'm really happy that, and they tend to be kind of what I would like to do. So that's nice. But mainly, yeah. So it's been kind of figuring out, okay, what tools we're going to use. I think we've kind of decided on kind of where we're going to start with. We'll deploy to AWS and kind of the technologies we use there. I don't want to bore the audience too much with the details there, but I think that we've got a solid plan. And the next steps would be to get something kind of, the first thing is just to deploy something that says OTP, like that's kind of the first step of any project. And then get it set up to where Sam can kind of go crazy on the front end. And then we can just kind of get that flywheel turning. So that's kind of where we're trying to get to in the next few weeks here.
Sam, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think Ian said it well. We're kind of laying the foundations right now. We had some good conversations around the front end tech and kind of what we're going to use there. So as Ian gets that in place, it'll prepare me to start building those interfaces. So yeah, we're set. We're set to jet. Just getting that foundation set up so that we can start building.
Love it. One thing I see some questions that we'll take from the audience in a minute or two. Before we get there, we should just do a quick actual project discussion. I'm wondering, should the first phase be recreating a version of the current landing page? So the current landing page that everybody saw that we showed is just using a third-party kind of website service. I'm wondering, should we build a version of that on our own stack first, or should we just dig into actually building the real app?
I think that'd be a good first step. I mean, because that would basically prove out, deployment and kind of front end, getting all those, all the styles and all that stuff set up. So I think that makes sense as a first step. The big next step would be making it, dynamic. Like, okay, you can log in now, and then you can create stuff and change data, stuff like that. But I think that makes sense. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, no, that sounds good. It looks pretty straightforward, so I think we could put that together relatively quickly. But yeah, it just gets the kind of nuts and bolts in place and ensures that everything is kind of dialed in. So that seems fine. The one kind of technical question would be about the contact form and where that goes and how that's implemented specifically. But we can probably follow up on that offline.
Yeah, the contact form, I think it just fires off an email. So for our version, we could just give an email address that people can send to.
Perfect.
Yeah, and then the accelerate call to action is just a link to Patreon. So that's also.
The contact form could be the first kind of dynamic piece that we add.
Yep.
So before login and stuff like that.
Yeah.
One question I have, Sam. How are you thinking about this as far as like between like the dinosaur? Every new page is a new HTTP request. Versus like a single page app, like you see a lot more. Do you have an idea of what you'd want to do there?
I mean, I think the dinosaurs had it right? Like we're gonna build a T-Rex here. No, I mean, from a technical perspective, actually, browsers have done so much to make the act of refreshing a page or navigating to a new URL very, very fast, right? Every browser wants to be interpreted as the fastest. So Chrome, Safari, Firefox, they've all done a ton of work to prefetch resources to make those additional page loads quickly. You can also give them hints now to make them faster at loading those pages. So I'm actually for that approach because it kind of, SPAs, like a fundamental law in programming is that when you introduce state and you make a stateful system, your system is instantaneously increased in complexity. And front ends that are state or SPAs are stateful. You've got this mutable buffer of memory about what's going on, and inevitably you're going to have some hard to find bugs. So I like sticking to just kind of the good old standard web model. We'll do some server templating. So have you figured out what kind of backend language you're going to use? Are you thinking about Scala still, or?
I was going between Scala, Java, and Kotlin. And
okay. We should do Kotlin. I wanted to try Kotlin.
I wanted to try Kotlin for years, so I was actually leaning toward Kotlin.
Andrew Murray's big on it too. So yeah.
Is he? Okay. Yeah, I think I've talked to him about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Sam, you're a breath of fresh air. I think a lot of people push for single page apps, but every time I work on them, it's a lot of extra work, and I don't know if there's necessarily a payoff there. So I think that approach makes sense. Totally.
And even from an experience perspective, I mean, one of my favorite applications to use is GitHub. GitHub's entirely server-side rendered and standard page requests. Some of the worst applications are SPAs where there's all this buggy behavior. So yeah, I'm right there with you, and I think that'll help us ship more quickly. It also makes the project more accessible, right? Tom mentioned that. The tooling won't be some crazy muddled web of different build tooling. It'll be, hey, these are web pages. It's pretty straightforward to come in and add something and edit it.
Yep.
Right on. So maybe one goal we could set for the team is in the next, let's say, 3 weeks plus or minus, we could have our own native version of the landing page on our stack. And that would be good too from a financial point of view, because the third-party service is charging us $40 a month for that landing page.
No way.
I know. But it was fast. Like that's the beauty of that service is like I could get that landing page up in an hour. And in the same way, you'd want like an OTP candidate to say like, oh yeah, maybe I should run for this office. And in an hour, they'll have like a really good looking kind of page. So yeah. All right. Well, let's start getting into some of the questions. So Vaughn, this is a great question because when we were talking to Eric Sanchez, getting his input, he was suggesting actually like, hey, Congress is of course super influential and great, but also you can get a lot of impact and traction early if you try and help out local races. So mayor, city council, school board, that kind of thing. And I know that we've discussed this as a team, and I think, if we go back to our startup roots, one of the things that I always took away from projects that I wish were more successful that I worked on was that starting narrower and then expanding from there is, I think, a better route than trying to, boil the ocean, let's say. And this is a tough one because Congress is, especially in today's world, like so front and center. And it's like our backstop from like kind of any kind of extremes in other branches of the government. On the other hand, like getting someone into Congress is a highly improbable kind of game, and you'd have to take a lot of shots on goals to get there. I have no doubt that in the long run we would want to play a big role in Congress. But I also wonder, like, hey, if we help change the mayoral outlook for a city, or got a city board involved and with more kind of representative, fresh voices, that's also impact, and it's also potentially more achievable. Like we could start with Seattle, let's say, since I know we all have history there. But I'm curious, like, do you guys have any thoughts on that? Kind of reflecting back on our shared experiences and stuff.
Yeah. So I think, let's see. Oh, as an engineer, like my first instinct is, oh, well, we can just do it all. We'll build a platform and we can handle from the president to city council. But like you said, that is not always the best approach. And I do think starting narrow makes sense. And when you think about, Congress versus city, county, and those kind of positions, you can make an argument that those smaller or lower level, like city positions, like have more of an effect on people's lives. I guess it depends on how you're going to look at it, but they're also more accessible maybe to the people we're trying to reach. To get people involved in politics, it's one thing to run for school board or city council or something, and Congress is another big step. So it could make sense for our platform to start small, we might have more people who are kind of in that kind of league where they'd want to get started in.
What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I lean towards start small as well, for two reasons. One, it provides I think a target that is more achievable and we'll get more feedback faster, right? The feedback cycle there is a bit more immediate, right? It also, from a voter perspective, I noticed that when I'm voting, national candidates and for positions in Congress and the Senate and such, I have a lot of information or more information, right? Because those candidates have much more skin in the game. So they have websites, they have a lot more material I can engage with. Smaller candidates often just have that little blurb in the little packet that you get in the mail. It's kind of hard to actually make an informed decision. So I think this tool could provide a vehicle also for voters to just find out more info about the people they're going to vote for in these small elections, because that's kind of underserved right now, I think.
Yeah, maybe the beta launch could be targeting an upcoming Seattle local election, and we just kind of try and get 10 candidates to put a profile up, and then go. And then if that works out really great, of course, nothing stops us from expanding. But then it would also help us kind of really get that critical mass, because the platform of the people would be less useful if it just had a handful of candidates like spread across the country, and then it's like, well, there's not much here. It's a little bit of a ghost town problem.
Is there any risk, like if we start in one place or the other, like what are the risks there? Like if we start small, I don't immediately think of any risk. Like I don't think that we wouldn't be able to go to like congressional elections if we wanted to. Do you guys see any risks in this choice here?
The downside that I could think of, which I think are smaller than the upsides that we discussed, but the downsides would be like, number one, you could have some donors who say, hey, I thought we were going to take over the Congress. I'm not really interested in donating to like the Seattle City Council kind of, candidate pool. The other one could be a branding thing where like, oh, of the people, that's just like city elections. But I don't know. I kind of feel like for the second one, it's like a restaurant that starts in one site and it's like, oh, now, In-N-Out Burger is coming, east or whatever, something like that. So I think we could grow from local to national. And then for the donor support, I mean, most of our costs will be fairly contained. And it's not like we need tens of thousands of dollars a month to run this thing. We're all volunteers. And so we just need to pay for the hosting and some software licensing. And, there's costs, but I don't think we're not like a startup that needs to raise 10 million bucks.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even with the donors, like say they were focused on Congress, I feel like that's an easy sell to say, listen, we need to prove this out here first. This is just a prudent step, which I think it could be, just to test out the platform, see what works, and then we grow it. So
yeah, another one, I feel like this would be a little bit of a no man's land, but we could pick one congressional district that's coming up in 2022 and have that narrow focus. I think the worry though is like you'd want for that district to have all of at least some meaningful number of credible candidates. And I don't know, I kind of feel like given our Seattle roots, we could pull something off with the Seattle City Council or maybe a congressional district in Washington State. But that's something for us to think about. But I think generally it sounds like we're all in the camp of going narrow. The question will be how narrow. Is narrow also local, or is narrow just one district?
Yep. And how does that affect the platform? Like when we're building this, if we're going narrow, how does that kind of affect it? Does this just affect marketing? Do we only allow, I guess we could have choice, like what race are you interested in running? And there's just one option,
Yeah, I think the way we build it largely should be kind of agnostic of, like we would envision there's going to be thousands of profiles, maybe even more someday, and they'll be divided into these like districts or races, campaign or whatever competitions. And to your point, like for V1, it's like, well, there's only one. It's the Seattle City Council 2022 election or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And but we would then be able to add more and then just put initially a browse page on top of that so people can find it, and then eventually a search and then a filter. Oh, I want to look at candidates that are interested in, basic income or climate change or who went to UW, whatever. I think that could be really where we grow, but we could start pretty narrow, and it doesn't seem to preclude us from if anything, the roadmap, it might just be a sequencing thing. Like we obviously won't care about filter and search early. We won't need the map view. We won't need a bunch of kind of browsing taxonomy, but the core is there's basically the candidate profiles and probably eventually the voter profiles. Mm-hmm. And then this is just sort of a matchmaking kind of marketplace. Yep. All right. Here's a question. So follow-up question from Vaughn. So is this like a Lincoln project endeavor design seek viability of a political candidate? I think that's one way to put it. It's basically the problem we're trying to solve is twofold. First is if someone is not a career politician and they're thinking of public service, how can we make it really easy for them to float a trial balloon without like getting a lawyer and officially announcing and all this stuff, and basically just saying like, I don't know, I'm just gonna kind of dip my toe in the water. I'm gonna create this little profile and I'm gonna see if people outside of my friends and family, or maybe even within, are willing to just click a I support, Bob button. And, and then from there, if I get maybe 100 people to say they'd be open to it, then I know, okay, there's something there. And if I don't, then I also know like, okay, well, maybe this is not my moment, or I can see the feedback that I'm getting. If I do, we all love Q&A. So there could be an AMA kind of module where they could take questions from potential constituents. But ultimately, it's about getting more people to decide if they want to run without making them make a huge commitment. Let's see. The other thing that I noticed, there's a lot of people, we were talking about AOC. We all have our own political beliefs, but this platform is going to be open. So for anyone out there listening is like, well, I don't like AOC. Okay, great. Then you can get an OTP candidate to challenge her, and maybe there's someone better. That's fine. I think our mission is not to necessarily say we want only Democrats or only Yang Gang or only libertarians or only Republicans, whatever. We just want more competition so that voters have more choices. Would you guys agree with that?
100%. Yeah, I mean, back to my point where there's a bunch of talented people out there, and sometimes the hardest thing is just being able to allow that talent to express itself, and we just want to help that. So
yeah, I'd echo that too. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're so divided and so at each other's throats, partially because of these career politicians who don't really represent us that well. So we all feel kind of unheard. And if we get more people on both sides who are more, do a better job of representing us, those discourses and discussions will be way more effective than they are now, and we'll feel way more represented. We won't feel so angsty about like, oh, I have no control what's going on. So yeah, both sides need better representation, and we're here to do that.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like politics today, it's like that food court with just like two options, and you're like, what? Like, I got to pick between these two? Like, where's the Panda Express when I need it, man?
Potatoes and like wilted lettuce.
Yeah. And you're like, shit. All right. So here, Susan has a question. How will this be different from all of the brochures, instant websites that anyone can get on their own? I think it's a great question. I'll take a shot at that, and then would love to kind of get your guys' thoughts. I think there's a few key differences. One is If we are successful at building not just the candidate side of the marketplace, but also the voter side, when a new candidate creates a profile, they'll have instant access to potential supporters. So in one universe where I create like a website tonight, or any of these kind of very good landing page and instant website tools, you put it up there, it's like a tree falling in the forest, like nobody will know. Whereas if Of the People becomes a platform known for having profiles of all the up and coming candidates, then the moment you hit publish, we can eventually not only have it browsable and searchable, but maybe we can even start surfacing on the homepage like, oh, this is a trending candidate, or this is a candidate near you, or this is a candidate that you as a voter have set up alerts saying you want to know whenever there's a new basic income supporter, whenever there's a new Green New Deal supporter, or whenever there's a new like lowering income tax, whatever is your thing. So that's, I think, a key part of it, is that there's would be this installed base of voters. And then I think the other part, the second part that makes it different is the interactivity, where it's not just this flat website, but you can actually take questions and answers. Maybe you can have some kind of communications with potential voters, but then there's also analytics like, oh, here's how many people support you. Here's how you stack rank against other people in your district, also on this platform, or here's maybe aggregated demographics of your supporters or the issues that they care most about. So I think it could be way more intelligent than a flat website. But that's my thought. It'd be great to get Ian and Sam your guys' input.
Yeah, kind of to echo what Tom said. I mean, my background being in tech, I've worked, from systems at Amazon that house all of their product data to Google search. I've worked on these, and then I've worked in small startups. And one of the biggest advantage that startups have is they can move fast, and that's a huge advantage when you can actually say, hey, COVID just happened. We need to make some updates so we can take advantage of that. And people want these new things. So I think that, one thing that we can also bring to the table is that we can be very kind of reactive to what the market is wanting and how we need to change. And we can kind of see what's happening, learn from that, and kind of quickly get those changes out there to the people. So I think that's another kind of big advantage that we have.
Yeah, and I think with respect to, I think of two big things in this category. One is kind of consistency of information, the way it's displayed, and getting rid of all the vaporware and marketing, right? If you go to a high-profile political website right now for a politician for their campaign, it's all marketing. It's kind of vaporware, right? There's lots of pictures and big bold lettering, and it's advertising. And this platform won't be advertising. It'll be more about kind of declaring what you're about, what you stand for, why it matters, what change you want to make, like the real message that is there and the real kind of purpose of that individual's decision to run. So I like the idea of kind of lifting that information. The other side that I think is we're making the same brochures and websites and web presence and engagement accessible to people that wouldn't be able to do that, right? Like it's expensive, hey, $40 to start a website a month. I mean, sure, that's not like going to break the bank, but still that might prevent you from necessarily doing it. And then you have to write all the content and figure out how to present it. We'll do the hard work to figure out how to, put that content in a presentable way online so that they just have to think about what they stand for and put it out there. We'll do it for them.
Yeah. In a way, it's similar to like Shopify. Back in the early 2000s, everyone was building their own e-commerce platforms, and now that's kind of crazy because we have ways to do that. Like you don't have to waste your time reinventing the wheel.
Totally.
Cool. Next question is, hey, this Of the People seems to overlap with the Good Party. There is a little bit of overlap there, and luckily we've had some great conversations with Farhad over at the Good Party. And Farhad was also on the Nerds channel just last week. I think the biggest difference with the Good Party is a few things. One is we are not taking a explicit position on whether we are in favor of third or fourth parties. We're just saying we want as many candidates as possible. If they're Republicans, if they're Democrats, that's fine. They don't have to be third party. I think the other big difference is that the Good Party is probably, if you think about like startup terms, later stage investments. They're for candidates who know they're for sure running. They have thousands of supporters. They're ready to take it to the next level and win the darn thing. And I think we're more like these angel investors or our community of OTP voters are like angel investors who want to get in early and influence who is going to run at all. And then once they kind of get traction on other people, you can imagine them graduating and putting themselves, and leaning into the Good Party and other platforms or that support more kind of mature candidates and campaigns. We're all about like those first, frankly, 100 non-friends and family, if you want to really narrow it down, because, I think our hypothesis is that that's the top of the funnel. And if you can get more action there, there's for sure going to be more results as people move through the process. So that's the question of the people. And then Lou wants to know, hey, can this be a good way to learn about candidates? When I know about candidates, I know very little about them. I think this was Sam's point, right? Like in some ways, you can find out more information on Amazon about a freaking like coffee mug, which the Yeti actually is quite good, I have to admit. It has a Q&A, it has reviews, it has the specs, it has the pictures, it has comparables, alternatives. And then like you get this thing in the mail, it's like, well, these are the people voting, and here's like a paragraph maybe. And I think our point here is like, yeah, it's not just to support candidates, but it's part of the shopping process for a voter. And I think what makes it even more interesting is to Sam's point, is not just marketing stuff. Like I think it would be great if we can make it so that you can ask them questions and you could say, okay, I get that you support this issue. I want to know more. Like, what about this specific part of that issue? Or where do you stand on this other thing? Or maybe eventually we have, questionnaires, multiple questionnaires, like, oh, this candidate scores 5 out of 10 on the Greenpeace questionnaire or on, whatever, the public transportation, questionnaire, all those kinds of things. So I think information, kind of removing information asymmetry is going to be a big part of solving the problem. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I think it raises an interesting thing for us to think about, which is that I can go start a Twitter account, right? And I can say, tweet at me and I'll answer your questions. But that doesn't really work. And it doesn't work because it gets lost in noise, right? Twitter's full of people like saying inflammatory things. And so as we create this platform and allow these AMAs to occur, we have to be careful about some aspect of moderation too, to prevent there from being kind of noise and it from devolving to the same thing. So, but definitely agree. The engagement model is something that I'd love to see there. When I read about these local candidates, I often want to ask them a question. I want to say, well, okay, you say you stand for this, but what have you done to indicate that? Or what experience do you have negotiating to achieve, this kind of thing? I'd love to be able to do that and see thoughtful answers and reply.
Yeah, I think it would also be interesting to take these kind of profiles, and then as we mature and some of our candidates actually get into office, we could also see how they kind of hold to what they said they were going to do. And I think that could be an interesting metric as well.
Yeah, totally. And then Lou brings up an interesting point. Maybe this is another reason why we should go for local, is that no one's doing anything. There are a number of other projects. There's a Good Party, there's Demo Draft, there's a bunch of stuff that the Republican and Democratic parties are doing, to kind of incubate congressional candidates. Not a whole lot at the local level. So that could be another reason for us to try and solve that problem and step into that breach, at least early on.
I wouldn't be surprised too if you could find like a local, like somebody in King County and actually work with them to say, look, we've got a website where we list these candidates and we actually entered in all of their profiles. So rather than send this brochure out, like, or include a link to it so people can consume it digitally too, right? Play that information source, because the federal government, they're strapped for cash, or the state governments are especially strapped for cash right now.
Yeah.
We can build that web presence for them.
Totally. And you know, like if some private company tried to do a deal with like the city of Seattle, they would charge like $10 million or something.
It'd be crazy. Yeah. It might already be in process, actually.
Landline wants to know, how are we going to attract unengaged people? You know, I think I'll take a first stab at it. My assumption is that actually we're really going, our core audience are the engaged people who want to play a bigger role and have more kind of opportunities to influence the candidate pool. I think for the unengaged folks, the pitch would be, if you're unengaged because you're tired of seeing the same faces, or you're tired of this one-way kind of like, you know, really, you know, scripted conversation, then this is the place for you, because you're going to see candidates that you're not used to seeing, and you're going to be able to ideally have a back and forth with them, and you're going to get the information you need. But that would be my hypothesis. I'm curious if you guys have thoughts.
I think that'd be a great metric for us. I mean, first of all, we can't attract unengaged people. I think that what we need to do is show people who are not engaged, like, hey, you can actually make a difference here. I think people are unengaged in voting and political life a lot because they just feel like they don't have any power, or it doesn't matter. If we can show them that, hey, you can look at the people who are thinking about running, and you can help the people you like actually get into office and then make changes that you want. I think that's how you could take someone who's unengaged and get them to be very passionate about this project. So I think the more we can do that, and maybe we have to think about getting that, like this is a two-sided marketplace. So we need to get the candidates, but also, getting people who are engaged is pretty easy, but then maybe we can look at how do we find these unengaged people and tell them, hey, we are working on this. We're trying to make this better for you. You should be interested in this.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo that. I think people are disengaged because they feel powerless, right? I mean, that's why you go interview people about why they don't vote too. Often young people don't vote because like, oh, whatever, what difference is it going to make? I'm one vote. This kind of platform could provide a vehicle to actually say, hey, I'm doing something. I'm supporting this candidate. I'm giving them $5 a month, or whatever I decide to pledge. So that will provide a vehicle to become more engaged. I also like the Amazon analogy in that I can send my grandma a link to, an Amazon coffee maker with a great description of why she should buy it, and she can buy it. But I can't send her a link to a political candidate or to a intelligent dialogue being held by that political candidate. Say, hey, Grandma, do you think you agree with these, this perspective, or do you agree with this? That should be just as possible. I should be able to link that information, share it, send it, and engage people that way.
Totally. Lou wants to know, is there a way to basically encourage people to run for office? I do think that the notion of drafting a candidate is a really interesting one, to the extent that maybe you create a profile for someone who hasn't decided to run. Like, let's say if you wanted, Joe Smith, who's an amazing person, to run, and he's like, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure. Like, could you be like, all right, well, look, I'll create a profile for you. If you get 1,000 people supporting you, let's do this. I think it'd be kind of cool. I mean, obviously you'd want it clear that this is a draft profile. This is a draft OTP candidate. This is not a form one or, a first party one. But I do think some people need a nudge. And I've seen studies, especially around women candidates, who they might need to be asked to run. The same way, like in the private sector, a lot of women statistically will not put themselves up for promotion as much as their male counterparts will. So I think there is something there about a pull from voters to kind of get candidates to run that we could explore. What do you guys think?
I could see another side to this where, maybe someone is interested in becoming involved in politics, but they don't even know where the opportunities are. So I could see us potentially, someone comes to the site and says, hey, I mentioned getting involved. And then we could say, hey, there's Seattle City Council, there's school board, whatever, here are the options. And so that it could be a kind of a discovery mechanism for encouraging folks to get involved.
Right on. Here's another question. I think we touched on this. I think, Austin, you're right that it would make it easier for people to figure out who to vote for. I have to admit, there have been local elections where I'm checking in boxes and I'm like, I think I saw a yard sign for that name, and you just wish there were an easier way. So for sure, hopefully we can do this. So Laura Lane's in favor of adding Q&A. Let's see. We talked about the good party. Laura Lane, I don't even know what Shopify is. Well, basically, if you wanted to sell something on the web and you weren't a technical person, like you've
probably used it.
Yeah, you could get an e-commerce site way faster than rolling your own. But she does agree with the competition of ideas. Let's see. Landlines wishing us success.
Thank you.
Wow, a lot of people are saying, oh, a fantasy political team. That might be kind of fun. Like if you gamify a little bit and you say, because we would track the outcome and maybe we would say like, you are really good at identifying people in their first 100, upvotes that end up getting 1,000. Because you're just like a talent scout kind of thing and make it a little bit more fun. It doesn't always have to be just about policy and, that kind of thing. What do you guys think of some kind of like gamification element to it?
I think that it'll drive engagement and hopefully it drives engagement in a good way, the kind of engagement. It seems to be the kind of engagement we want. If it drives people to be looking at these candidates and evaluating them and saying, hey, I think this is a good candidate here, like that's great. So and giving recognition for that, I think I don't see a big problem with that. So
Sam?
Yeah, mock elections, I don't know. It seems like it could be fun. It'll be fun to see if that idea could materialize.
Yeah, sounds like a fun experiment. And then Thomas wants to know, how would we compete with demo draft? So demo draft is a very similar concept. My sense of these things is we're all trying to serve the same end. We basically want more people to run and more competition. And if one of these projects, whether it's Good Party, Demo Draft, Of the People, whatever, like really kind of gets major traction, that's great. And if it's not us, like that's okay. And there's also a world where multiple platforms can thrive the same way, some people like Android, some people like Apple, it's fine. It's all good. So I think ultimately what we're going to bet on is our ability to execute, and that'll be, up to us to prove it. A lot of projects come and go and they start with a lot of excitement. But I see this as, probably like if it's successful, it's going to be a multi-year kind of effort. And we're not in this game to win. We want just maximum benefit to the country. And if it's because of us, but we end up getting written in the history books as like one of the early entrants, but we weren't the kind of the biggest one at the end. Like, I think that's okay. I'm fine with that. What do you guys think?
Absolutely agree. yeah, whether we win or not doesn't matter, because I think the work we're trying to do is more important. So, and I don't see. I mean, I think that what we're doing makes a lot of sense to me. I think that I like our chances, and so I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah, I agree that it's just important stuff, and the more people that try to solve this problem, the more likely it is that it'll get solved, right? Competition's healthy. We'll learn from each other's efforts. Platforms will get better, and we'll all make different decisions, and one of those decisions might be the key that makes that platform take off and then solve this problem. And that's all we really care about in the end. So I totally echo the sentiments. Yeah.
And I think there's opportunity for partnership here too. There's the more people and teams, groups, organizations in the space, the better. And we're always kind of on the lookout for partnerships and opportunities to kind of leverage what we have. So, the more people in the space, the better.
Yeah, in a way, it's validating to see lots of teams trying to solve this problem. I mean, this is what you see often in the for-profit kind of tech world, where when a new space heats up, there's going to be a lot of similar efforts going on, and I think that's generally a good thing. Laura wants to add another thing to our backlog, which is keeping a history of their responses and then holding them accountable after they get elected. I think that's great. Like, so they can't delete their tweets where they said this thing, and then that could be a really important thing. Yeah. And Mount SLR agrees. And then a lot of people are saying they would play the fantasy politics. So we may have to definitely put that on the backlog. And I think the thing that I struggle with on the fantasy stuff is the most interesting fantasy stuff would be at the national level. Like, oh, will AOC kind of, get reelected, or will, famous person get reelected or win, which it's not necessarily aligned with our goal of getting new voices in. So I wonder, like, as tempting as it would be to build a fantasy thing for the usual suspects, we would probably want to do a fantasy thing for, like, basically the farm league, and or for college sports, equivalent, where this isn't like, yeah, if you want to bet on AOC, I guess you can for that district's fantasy league, but we would try and maybe bias it or give more emphasis to people who are picking candidates very early that nobody's ever heard of. Because that's like if you got the Midas touch, like, that's the real skill. Any thoughts from you guys on the fantasy stuff before we wrap up?
I love fantasy football.
Yeah, indeed. I know you do. Ian. I was watching Super Bowl 49 again a couple weeks ago.
Why do you want to relive it?
Because it was such an epic game, and had it not been for that one play, like, it would have been the best game ever. Like, all of those turnovers, like, oh my God. So yeah, but anyway, we digress a little bit. Well, hey, I want to thank Ian and Sam, you guys, for volunteering for this effort, and I want to thank everyone out there who's been encouraging this project along, and of course our Patreon supporters, where if you are interested in this project and you want to help us out, there's a few things you can do. You can for sure like this live stream, share it, go to ofthepeople.co, and if you want, you can become a Patreon supporter. I think it starts at like $5 a month. All of that money goes to product development. Like, none of it will go to Sam, Ian, or me in our pockets. It's going to go basically to Amazon, GitHub, GoDaddy, like a bunch of different vendors that are going to be required. And then anything above that, I think we would reserve for marketing of the people to kind of grow that critical mass. So if you're watching this and you're like, hey, I like what this is about, go ahead, do that, and check out Patreon. We do weekly status updates on Patreon, so you can hold us accountable. And, maybe we'll do another stream with this group. This was kind of a fun conversation. We got some free market research in the chat in about, let's say, 4 weeks. And hopefully we can show off the new native built landing page on whatever that new back-end technology that you're just scaring the crap out of me. Can't keep engineers away from the next shiny thing, but hopefully it'll work, Ian.
Hope so.
I love it. Any parting words before we wrap up?
This was fun. Thanks for the discussion.
I love it. Well, then with that, we're going to say goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye.